Hi folks, Matthew Lanigan here with BayWa. We're just going to give it another minute. We have quite a few people still hopping into the webinar, and we'll be back in just a minute to kick this off. Thanks so much. Hi guys, Matthew Lanigan here again with BayWa RE. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here in Canada. Just wanted to thank you all for taking the time to be with us today and learn a little bit about SolarEdge commercial solutions. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. You are able to enter questions. There's a chat box you'll see in the bottom right corner. So if you can just enter questions there, we'll do our best to answer those as we go, and then there'll be time at the end to answer some of them. Continuing education is a really important thing for BayWa, for our staff, as well as our customers. So once again, we really thank you for attending. This will be recorded, and we will share it during the next newsletter that goes out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ben Frank, who's Senior Director of National C&I Sales with SolarEdge, and Carolyn Humphreys, who's C&I Sales Manager.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Carolyn Humphreys here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I've been with SolarEdge for 4 years now, and really excited about what we've done and what's ahead. Ben Frank, did you want to just introduce yourself quickly, Ben? Ben will be presenting the second half of this deck.
Sure, thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Frank. I've been with SolarEdge now for about just over 6 years, and very excited to present to everybody on the call today and all of BayWa's customers.
Oh, and Ben is from Canada, so particularly excited to be able to speak to your hometown towns. So today we're going to talk about the numbers a little bit, then we're going to move on to global manufacturing and R&D. We're going to talk about our SolarEdge commercial solution more generally, and then hone in on the 3-phase inverter solution with Synergy technology with a new form factor, a program we call Advantage, which is super exciting, and our roadmap. Everybody likes to hear about what's coming down the road, and then talk a little bit about resources and looking forward to some Q&A. So the number I always focus on is #1 inverter company. Now you hear people bandy that number around, and it's interesting that it can be true for multiple reasons depending on what you're referring to. We are referring to by revenue. So we are the #1 global inverter company by revenue. You can see in just Q1 2021, we had over $400 million. We're in 28 countries with lots of patents, 366, and many pending, another 360. We're up to 3,400 employees, which is exciting to me. I saw a tremendous amount of growth. That's to support you, our customers. We have 24 gigawatts of solar shipped worldwide now, which won't surprise anybody. And I think what's really neat is we have over 2 million monitored systems. And if another company said they had 2 million, they would have a lot of inverter data. But as those of you who know us know that means we actually have a lot more data than that. We have all of the module level data, which is very exciting to us because we're extremely data driven. This is exciting to ensure quality and quantity. This is the SolarEdge New Plant, and I believe we have a video that hopefully will play.
The events of this year have proven, not only for SolarEdge, but for us all, that this industry is mature and can service the market even in extremely challenging times. Smart energy, and solar in particular, have proven to be an excellent investment for home and business owners. And I believe that the demand for solar in a climate and world where backup and grid independence is growing in importance will continue to accelerate. We jointly have a lot to be proud of and a lot to look forward to. In fact, I believe, as early signs in Europe indicate, that investments in solar PV, including storage, all around the world will be one of the key drivers for economic recovery in 2021 and beyond. I'm speaking to you here from Sela 1, our brand new automated manufacturing facility in the northern part of Israel on the outskirts of Nazareth. Here, we are producing inverters and power optimizers with cutting-edge automated production lines, enabling us to ensure high-quality new products will be delivered to you faster and tariff-free. Sela 1 is an example of our commitment to driving adoption of renewable energy globally.
Well, it's nice that you got to hear from our new CEO, Zivi. He's a wonderful person and a wonderful CEO. You can see that that's a big step for us, obviously, to have our own facility in Israel. We're really excited about it. And we have manufacturing like most in China, but we now have multiple options, which I think will better serve some folks that sometimes there's some stipulations about where manufacturing is happening. So China, Vietnam, Hungary, Korea, Israel. And then R&D centers, you know, we started out in Israel, but we've obviously moved forward with opening up even more R&D centers in Bulgaria, California, Korea, and Italy. Being an innovative company, this is really important to us. And we've made the investment both internationally and with both financially and with a lot of manpower. So getting to our solution, for those who may not be familiar with us, the way to think about our product, I'm sorry we call them inverters and optimizers, because what we've really done is taken an optimizer and torn it in two. And we put part of it on the roof, that's the optimizer, and then a vastly simplified inverter is placed wherever you want, really. and the reason for this, you know, to do it so differently and uniquely is to increase energy production. So all panels are able to perform at maximum output, which is the requirement of an optimizer. So rapid shutdown devices do not accomplish this, but an optimizer does. And an optimizer that's integrated with the inverter is, again, a different solution than anyone else. So this allows for flexible design, much longer string lengths, which are going to save you on that balance of system. You get multiple azimuths and tilts on the same string, which I started this in 07. That just still blows my mind. Shade only impacts the affected modules. So though we can't eliminate the effect of shade, we can certainly mitigate it to the lowest possible impact, which is every 2 modules in the commercial space. Our enhanced safety, I think, is worth mentioning because I believe that you don't have the same, obviously don't have our national electric codes requirement. And really what that is it's just a minimum safety standard. What's more important to us is that we exceed those standards with safe DC technology, which is, you know, our greatest effort and pride to make solar as safe as it can be made. We can also redesign on the fly because we have all those flexibility within those strings where you have a window of different string lengths versus, you know, a multiple that you have to adhere to. That allows you to add and subtract modules from strings. And especially if they're facing a different way or at a different angle, that's not a problem. So that's a feature that people really enjoy, being able to design it more easily and redesign it more easily. Module level monitoring and performance data, I think we talked about this. I mentioned it already, the fact that you can see what every module is doing is a lot of power in the hands of your O&M and the people who are going to own these assets long term. So A traditional inverter, I think it's worth mentioning how we're different, because it can all sound really great until you realize just what it is that differentiates us. And when you have the limitations of a traditional inverter, you are reducing your energy production because you can't possibly, everything's tracking to that lowest performing module when modules are strung in series. And so if one module has more shading or more dirt, then the whole string is being brought down. Now the strings are shorter, but when you pumped up the voltage in these high voltage systems, now 1500 volts, the only problem with that is, yeah, you got longer strings, still shorter than ours, but you've now also have more strings tracking to that more modules tracking to that lowest performing module. So that's certainly an advantage of our technology over a traditional inverter. The other thing that limits you with a traditional inverter is a much less flexible design. You have limited string lengths, you have to face them all in the same direction at the same pitch, and you have to use the same module wattage. So when you go to replace a module, you're really going to have to hunt for that, or either put aside some modules or look for a module that is in kind. Whereas not only can we add modules, but over time you can add back the energy that you've lost, which is an interesting concept from an O&M perspective over a long period of time. And with those traditional inverters, you're going to really need to avoid shade, whereas we don't have that problem. Unforeseen redesigns. I think we've all, if you're in solar, you know the feeling of getting on the roof and either somebody replaced the AC equipment and you weren't notified. We have long cycles, obviously, or somebody just made a mistake, because those certainly happen, and those redesigns can everything can come to a grinding halt, and that can be costly until your engineer is able to redesign that system. So, and finally, sorry, somebody else is clicking my, and no module level monitoring or performance data. So, you're hoping your modules are doing well. You do have a general sense, of course, of how your modules are doing, but you can't see specifically. We have something on our monitoring portal called a module mismatch report. If you haven't seen it, go take a look. It's pretty interesting. You can see what you would have lost. So you have a SolarEdge system and you can see what the module mismatch is. That tells you what kind of mismatch exists in other systems that don't have SolarEdge. So we're very excited about the fact that you have all this visibility and all this power in your hands over time. And then finally, safety. I know you guys don't have the code compliance, but for those in the US on the line, again, code compliance really is a minimum safety standard. We've exceeded those standards, and this is important to us because if in a traditional inverter you lose power from the inverter, those modules are still live, and you have really an uncontrolled power source. And that high voltage, when the sun's out, is obviously something people are concerned about that we've mitigated. So why do we win on commercial rooftops? I know a lot of people will say code, but it's great to be speaking to people that are thinking about safety without code, and that's our bread and butter, so to speak, is that safe DC technology. We're very proud of it. More production, of course, equals more revenue for whoever the asset owner is. Larger systems also equal more revenue. So say you have constraints. I like how people sometimes think on the ground that's unconstrained, but on the roof it clearly is. You have a boundary and you have places you can put modules, and now you have more places to put modules that you couldn't previously. The lowest cost of code compliance, should you need to comply, is still SolarEdge. And we talked about that design flexibility, the ability to locate the inverter anywhere. People got very accustomed to putting that inverter up on the roof, but that costs you module space. So we're really excited about being able to put that inverter maybe down where it's more accessible for your O&M folks on the ground, ideally. And that way you didn't take up module space and you can access it more easily. And this also reduces your balance of system because you have a lot more control and you decide. So it goes without saying really, but it's worth mentioning that we have serious situational savings, meaning if there is any shade, and I know a lot of the time we think, oh, you're up on a roof, you're away from shade, but you've got all of these impediments, parapets, poles, wires, things that can actually throw a little bit of shade here and there, which, as you know, Once one module is affected with another technology, they're all affected. So for us, as soon as we eliminate all of that and free up some of that additional space, we really do make commercial projects. I think we're at 60 to 70% of US commercial rooftop at this point, with that number growing every day due to some poor luck for others on, I don't really want to get into fire safety, but we're seeing a big uptick in our business as a result of it. So what we're I'm speechless. It's so exciting to have a new form factor. So the existing inverters are fantastic, but what we found is with a product advisory board of really talented engineers that over time, all the feedback back that we're given, our culture of innovation allows us to make those changes that people have asked for and finally hand the market what everybody's really been begging us to do, which is make it even easier and even better. So our module design, previously we had primaries and secondaries. We've eliminated that, and our new modular design allows for really compact, even lighter weight inverter units. They're all identical. So whether you're using 2 or 3 units, those will be Synergy units, and you'll have a single management interface called the Synergy Manager. And that's going to be the only thing that is different between the different sized inverters. So this will take a little bit of getting used to. You can see the image, hopefully, if you're not driving, over on the right-hand side where you'll see 3 units above. Those are identical. And that Synergy Manager, you'll see it's bigger, so there's more space to work in. That's below. We now have the standard 150% DC oversizing for higher production possibilities. We have enhanced safety with built-in temperature sensors. So, what I like about this team is even if it's, they've made so many efforts on the safety front, they just keep making it safer and safer because it just can't be too safe for sure. So the integrated nighttime PID, now a lot of people I don't think talk too much about potential induced degradation, but it's real. We see all the module data, so we're really aware of it, and the fact that we can mitigate it at night with a rectifier is very exciting. The built-in Type 2 AC and DC surge protection device is also exciting. Of course, we have the standard that's required, but we've now taken it to that next level to a Type 2. It's monitored and field replaceable, and that's exciting too. You'll be able to tell if there was a strike and go out and replace it. And so always have the protection that you need. There's a streamlined and unique PV site pre-commissioning with automated validation for full visibility of the entire system's components and wiring. And what's exciting about that is, come day of commissioning, you'll actually be able to be completely ready because you've plugged in a battery to that inverter and pre-commissioned it already beforehand. And I know the folks that are installing are very much looking forward to that feature. We also support a 3-wire connection. This accommodates no neutral and delta configurations. And we support a single DC input combining to be cost effective for aluminum cables. Again, a big ask was to be able to accommodate aluminum, not just copper, and this will result in even more savings. And at this point, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm going to hand this over to Ben.
All right, thank you, Carolyn. So just this is a reminder, you feel free to send your questions in to the question box and go to webinar, and we'll do what we can to answer as many of the questions as we can at the end of the presentation. As Carolyn said, the single DC input combining, that's actually something new that we have in this Synergy platform. But we also have the multi-input combining as well, if that's the preferred way of designing your system. So, Carolyn had gone through the configuration of the inverter. So this is a little bit closer look of the inverter. And by the way, all of I see one question on here, data sheets. Actually, the data sheets are all on our website. You should be able to access them. So you have the Synergy units, which, as Carolyn said, they're all identical. If you're familiar with our current Synergy platform, of which this one is replacing, now all the inverter engines, they're various sizes, but they're all the same. It's all a single part number, regardless of the application. But in this unit that we're presenting here, they're 40 kilowatts each. So this would be the 120 kilowatt inverter at 480 volts. The bottom box is the Synergy Manager. So that's where all of your connections are made. So it is modular interconnection between the Synergy Manager and the Synergy units. And those are the plug-in DC cables, AC cable, as well as the comms cable. So that's already pre-wired. You don't need to do any of that wiring. But your outside connections, so that being your strings, and these are fused inputs. So you do have actually 4 fused inputs per Synergy unit. So you can get up to 12 strings connected into the Synergy Manager. Of course, your communications, and as well as your AC wiring or AC connections. I do want to add that the unit itself, in terms of the space for connections, we're very excited about this because the box itself is we've upgraded. The previous box was more of a polycarbonate. This is an aluminum box, so a lot sturdier, and it's almost 3 times the size of the previous Synergy box, meaning that you have a lot more room in there for work, for making all of your connections, as well as having the space now for aluminum wiring. So if you're doing larger projects, they're very common on ground mount. If you're using AC, if your AC wiring is aluminum, then you have the space now to run aluminum wiring and aluminum lugs. And there's absolutely no reason to go inside the inverter itself, so that you can look at that as a sealed unit and all connections going through the Synergy Manager. So like our existing inverters that you may be familiar with, we do use a set app capability on your smartphone. So this is a SolarEdge app, as you saw from the previous picture. And this is a couple of years now. This is not anything new, but we've eliminated the if you recall, the LCD screens, the small alphanumeric screens that you'd have to struggle going through, and just 3 lines of alphanumeric numbers and trying to do all of your setup prior to commissioning. We've transitioned all of our inverters, single phase, 3-phase, to the set app capability. This inverter is not any different. So you're able to set up the inverter, pair the optimizers, ensure that the latest firmware is in both the inverters and the optimizers, all through the set app application that would go onto your smartphone. Of course, this inverter is unique in the SolarEdge lineup of products, where it has the pre-commissioning capability that Carolyn talked about, where you could actually, even without grid available, using a little battery bank, plug it into the Synergy Manager and go through this set app process so that everything is, call it pre-commissioned and ready for when the utility brings in the grid. So if you look at benefits in a nutshell, and how this inverter is different than our other products and really other inverters on the market. So we have a lot of different sizes now. We have 80 kilowatts, the 100, the 120, all at 480 volt AC. We also have the 50 kilowatt at 208. So if you ask, how does it look different? Let's say between a 50 kilowatts and the 100, it actually doesn't look different. It's just the operating voltage of the inverter would be at 208 instead of 480. We do allow for 150% oversizing. In the past, we needed to have waivers above 135, so that's all been eliminated. Actually, even on the current platform. And you could go with 150% oversizing. The PID rectification, that's new to this inverter. So basically, as Carolyn mentioned, that gives you the ability to automatically reverse polarity at nighttime to reverse any potential induced degradation that's happening with the modules. So this is something new that we have not done before on any of our inverters. So I did talk about the, if you look at the install time and cost, I talked about the pre-commissioning, and that's a really neat feature that really a lot of our customers are doing large projects, either roof or ground mount, that the grid's just not available, and they could still do pre-commissioning without that grid available. Automated validation and reporting. So this is something that we'll be adding in the next couple of months, and that's really validating the configuration and the commissioning and generating a nice report. So that's in process right now. Carolyn talked a lot about enhanced safety, and what I want to focus on here is, again, something that's unique to this inverter, where we actually put thermal sensors on both the DC and the AC terminal blocks in the Synergy Manager. And just to recall, the Synergy Manager is this box here, and these are the Synergy units on top. So we are now monitoring that. So if a connection, for whatever reason, is getting loose or not properly torqued, over time, the temperature will rise. And before you have any kind of call it issue, thermal event or whatever from an overheated connection, you will get an alert to say, hey, there's a temperature issue on this particular connection, and then you could go address that through the O&M department. The surge protection devices, these are monitored, so that's the AC and the DC surge protection, and they are also field replaceable. So let me just spend a minute talking about that as well. So of course, the inverter, in order to meet UL and CSA requirements, has AC surge protection built in, but this is above and beyond what's just required by code. We put higher level, stage 2 or level 2, I think it's called, surge protection, built into the Synergy Manager to give you that extra layer of protection. The last thing I want to talk about is the installation, how easy and simple it is. The fact that these are modular inverters, so 120 kilowatt inverter, that really you don't need to have a crane. I mean, this is, a 2-person job, can easily move each one of the inverter engines. The inverter engines themselves are about 25% lighter than the current Synergy. So although it's more power, current Synergy inverter engines are 33.3 kilowatt. These are 40 kilowatt, so it's 20% more power, but 25% lighter. So it makes it very easy install. I know initial installations that we've seen across North America, a single installer has been able to move it around. And then, of course, the fact that you have a modular approach to a 120 kilowatt inverter is the higher uptime capability. So if one engine goes down, you still have the other 2 engines that are operating, and you don't lose 120 kilowatts. So, one of the reasons that we see a lot of customers use SolarEdge on commercial projects, and specifically ground mounts. I mean, rooftops are, pretty straightforward. As Carolyn said, we've got north of 60% market share, at least in the US market, because of the safety capability. But when you look at ground mounts, now that we have one of the versions of the 120 is specifically designed for ground mount applications. It doesn't have the rapid shutdown and other stuff in there that would be needed for a rooftop. And therefore, we really got some cost out of it and made it very, very aggressive to compete with other 1500 volt string inverters. And the reason that companies have been moving to SolarEdge for ground mounts, and particularly with this product, is because of the energy production, right? Carolyn talked about the benefits of optimization and different conditions and allowing for greater production. This is an example of a project analysis that we did for a customer in the Pacific Northwest. Was a 3.4 megawatt ground mount site with 435 watt bifacial modules, right? And bifacial is an excellent fit for SolarEdge because of that bifaciality and the backside lighting, you're creating a lot of mismatch. And in general, anything that creates module mismatch, whether it's coming from the module itself or bifacial or shading or different angles, orientations, or if you have trackers or dirt, all of these things kind of fall into our strength, which is production. And the reason that we produce more energy, regardless of what kind of inverter we're up against, we've seen it against even large central inverters, is because the optimizer is your maximum power point tracker, right? And for those of you who are not familiar with MPPTs, maximum power point tracking is the algorithms built into typically the inverter to harvest the most possible energy you can out of the module, right? In our case, and Carolyn describes this very well, we take that traditional inverter, we rip it in half, we put the PowerPoint tracking capability into the optimizer, and now our granularity is basically 2 modules. So we're really able to drill down to maximize that production so that, at the end of the day, that's what's most important, either for you guys or for your customers. They want to maximize production, which maximizes the revenue generated from the solar system. So this particular example, it had no shading and 3.4 megawatt. We ran PV-Syst, so very globally accepted modeling tool. And you can see that in year 1, we produced 2% more energy, and by year 20, almost 6% more energy. And the reason that production increased over time is because PV-Syst tracks module degradation or degradation dispersion, which means that modules degrade but at different rates over time, so that your mismatch increases over time. So this is a pretty significant, if you could find on an average over a 20-year project, about 4% more energy each year, that could be a game changer and make the project even more profitable or more valuable to the owner. So, so this is a good example of the benefit of optimization, even for large ground mounts. So when we looked at this particular project and we broke it down to not just the production benefit, but also the balance of system, right? So one part of it is production, which I talked about in the previous slide. But over here, we're looking at the balance of system. And the reason that we have balance of system savings, which in this case was almost 2 cents a watt, is because we have longer strings, right? So that optimizer, at the same time as generating more production from the modules, because it is a buck boost power supply, we're able to create these very long strings. So this was up against a 1500 volt string inverter, which typically has strings of about 26 or so modules. In this particular case, because of the optimizer, we had strings of over 40 modules. Longer strings means fewer strings. Fewer strings means you're going to have less home runs back to the inverter, and therefore you're going to save wire and labor to install the wire. So that's where this 2 cents a watt comes in. So again, depending on whether it's regardless of whether it's a rooftop, carport, or ground mount project, you're always going to see production benefit from SolarEdge. And the more difficult the site, if there's shading, if there's different angles, different orientations, if the ground is undulating, will tell you how much more production you're going to get. And there's always balance of system savings because of the long strings. So switching away from the 120K platform and talking about, this is a little bit more general discussion on our commercial offering globally. And this program, and Carolyn mentioned it in the outline for today's presentation, the Advantage program. So what is the Advantage program? This is something new that we started in the last 6 months. We trialed it last year with a few customers. and we introduced it this year. And basically, it's a peace of mind program that's of no cost to yourselves. And essentially, what we're doing is we're guaranteeing the uptime of the optimizers, right? So what's different about SolarEdge compared to traditional inverters, whether they're string or centrals? We have an optimizer, right? So that has been a cause of concern. People have said, well, it's different, and we're concerned about it. And basically, we created the Advantage program to cover potential lost production resulting from failed optimizers. And basically, what we're saying is don't roll the truck, right? So for the first 2 to 2.5 years of the project, we will track through our monitoring portal. We will track any lost production. And then every 6 months, you roll a truck. Then you send SolarEdge the invoice for the calculated production loss, as well as there is some reimbursement for truck roll as well. And that takes away any concern there may be of having optimizers, right? So the idea is if you have a bad optimizer, you don't roll a truck. The amount of lost production from one optimizer is very little. And in this case, SolarEdge will pay for that. Right, so that's the Advantage program. Please talk to your SolarEdge sales rep. If you're in Canada, it's SEDEC. SEDEC covers the Canadian market. We have a pretty straightforward application process to go through in order to qualify and set up your project in Advantage. And really, there's really only 2 things. The first thing is the project needs to be above 100 kilowatts. So we're not doing really small projects, but anything 100 kilowatt and above, that's number 1. And number 2, we do want to have that paperwork before the project is commissioned. So before it's up and running, we want to have the paperwork to make the team will make sure that everything is functioning okay. And then we hit go once commissioning or the site starts operating, and then we'll start calculating any potential loss. So that's the Advantage program. And again, please reach out to your SolarEdge salesperson who could assist with that. When we look at the roadmap, I think we covered all of this already in the previous discussion, but this is a good summary to show the current offering as well as the new offering. And you can see we didn't really talk about the single units themselves, but the current offering, you can see at 208, we had a 9 kilowatt and a 14.4. We also have a 20, 30, and 33.3. And the new offering is the 17.3 at 208 and a 40 kilowatt at 480. But we will also have versions of the 30 and the 33.3 that are basically derated versions of the 40 kilowatt. You can see the weight difference. I mentioned 25%. Sorry, my bad. It's actually 30% lighter. So it's 70 pounds instead of 100. And the ratio, as you can see, it's 150%. And then I think the other key thing here is, the 3-wire application. So you no longer you don't require the neutral that you had with the current platform. And similarly, on the Synergy inverter side, this is the current configuration, and this is what we presented today. So you could see size-wise, very similar. Weight, definitely lower weight. You could see all of the different flavors, if you want to call it that, of the 50K, sorry, of the new Synergy platform. So the 50K, 80, 100, 120. And just if there is a question on it, the 100K is basically the same as the 120, right? You'll have 3 Synergy units. We just derate the 120 and relist it for ULCSA so that you have 100 kilowatt. And I think feedback from a lot of customers is that they like that inverter and block size, 100 kilowatts. So that's why we still have the 100. Of course, the 80 is just 2 units plus the Synergy manager. So all of these Synergy assets, we call them assets. So that includes the data sheet, quick install guide. We have an interactive brochure. That's all on our website. We'll actually have our marketing department will be sending out a pretty comprehensive email blast next week with some other details on the SE120K, like, easy way to order, the number of units you need of each to come up with your with the inverter size that you need, as well as links to all of these assets. But you can get all of these data sheets and stuff on our website right now. In general, we do have other resources as well that may be useful to you as you go out and sell solar systems, and customers ask questions on the inverter engine that's being used. So we do have a commercial catalog really meant for installers and EPCs, goes through a lot of detail of what Carolyn and I talked about today. There's an investor catalog, which is very, very similar. It's really meant more for system owners and investors, and it's focused more on the numbers and the ROIs. We do have a commercial fact sheet, which gives a good overview of SolarEdge. And then we also have all on our website, and you can see this is a link here, and I know the BayWa team will share the presentation. So you could go to the link and find case studies and other details that could help explain to your customers about SolarEdge C&I offering. Here's some examples of some of the case studies that we have. I believe there's more that are on the website, but again, gives a good overview of whether it's ground, roof, or floating. We've got a little bit of everything that has been installed somewhere. So in summary, we like talking about the unique architecture of the SolarEdge platform, and really, the main thing is we're always trying to maximize the energy yield, because at the end of the day, it's always about the dollars. The design flexibility, reducing costs. Typically, we see larger system sizes because of SolarEdge, because of the shade mitigation. Of course, the advanced safety. This has been part of the DNA of SolarEdge since the company started 15, 16 years ago. And then because of that monitoring capability, the lower O&M costs and higher system uptime because of the unique architecture. So with that, I thank everybody for their time and listening to the presentation. And we could certainly open it up to more questions. I don't know, Matt, how you want to do that. If you want to open up the line, looks like there's about 75 people or so on the webinar. I do see some questions here.
Yeah, if folks can just type them into the chat box, I think that's the best way to go about it. And there's a couple there, Ben, so if you see them now, maybe we can answer those ones to start.
Sure. So let me take a look here, and I'll do what I can to answer. Oh, wow, I see some old colleagues from the Canadian market. Good to hear from everyone. First question, let's see, data sheets. So yes, data sheets. Oh, okay. This data sheet, inverter series indicates that 25 amp single pole DC fuses are integrated in the additional features section. Does that mean that the fuses are standard feature? Does that require additional SKU like fuse switches that were available in the past? So yeah, that's a great question. This was Hamilton Hutchinson asked the question. So that's a great question. So actually, that is different about the new Synergy platform. The current platform, because there was 3 strings per inverter engine, we didn't have fusing. We didn't require fusing. Now that we have 4 strings per inverter engine, we had to add fusing back in. Yes, it's a 25 amp fuse. Yes, it's included with the Synergy Manager. So you don't need to purchase any fuses unless you're looking for spares. The next question from Kelly Tallis, that's single input combining for an SE120K, one input for all 3 Synergy units? Well, first of all, thanks, Kelly, for using all the right terminology. So yes, so just to specify that there is one input for the combined input, there's one input per synergy unit. So it's really 3 inputs, 1 per synergy unit. So hopefully that makes sense. So it's not a single input for the entire 120K, it's actually 3 inputs, and we reduce it down from 12 down to 3. What is the greatest difference in strings that the optimizer can fix? Like what percent? Lou Mareri asked the question. Let's see, how can I answer that? If you look at our the data sheets on the optimizers, right? So this is not so much of a inverter question, but an optimizer question. At the bottom of the data sheets for each one of the optimizers, so you got to figure out which optimizer you're using for your project, right? For your modules, it's really tied to the modules that you're using. And you go to that data sheet. At the bottom of the data sheet are all of the details on the minimum string length, either minimum number of modules or minimum number of optimizers, as well as the maximum string length, maximum number of modules, maximum number of optimizers. And then depending on how close you get to the maximum DC power of that optimizer, then that tells you how much difference you could have between the strings. So for example, I'm going by memory now, like a P950, I think you could go to 20 kilowatts on a string. But if you go all the way to 20 kilowatts, then the maximum difference between strings is 2000 watts. Right? If your string lengths are shorter, but still above the minimum, then you may have a little bit more flexibility. You're not tied to that 2 kilowatt per string difference. So hopefully that answers the question. Again, refer to the data sheet in the optimizer that tells you the details of what you can and can't do. Another thing, I'm going to throw in a little plug there for this, our designer tool. It's a SolarEdge designer tool, which is free. You could go to our website. You can find it under, I forget where it is on the website, but I think it's pretty straightforward. Under one of the drop-down menus, you'll see designer tool. You could download it. Actually, it's not a downloadable tool, but an online tool, and you could use it to design your projects, right? So it'll tell you what you can and can't do based on the module type, inverter that you're using, and you could even create a layout and do shading, and it's got quite a bit of capability. The other beauty of the designer tool is you could then port the design over to the monitoring portal so that you don't have to recreate it when you do your system. So hopefully I answered that question. Let's see. The question from Dan Hoyle. Hey Dan, hopefully all's well with you. What is the difference between the SE120K ground mount inverter and the SE120K standard unit as per the online specs? So great question, Dan. The SE120 ground mount, we have 2 versions of it. We now have 2 versions of it. We have the single input, which is really the 3 input, and then also the multi-input, and basically anything associated with the rapid shutdown requirements that you would see in NEC code have been removed from the inverter to get the cost down. And so when you compare that inverter to the rooftop version, which we just released, which is all multi-input, we did what we could to get the cost down to be more competitive with 1500 volt string inverters.
Ben?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to add in, I think some people then are concerned, is it less safe? The answer is no. You were specific to say the requirements of code It simply isn't looking to meet the requirements of code, which takes quite a bit of doing, but it's still the safe, it still shuts down to 1 volt safe DC.
Yep, no, great point, Carolyn. Thanks for adding that in. And yeah, that safe DC capability is a function of the optimizer, which doesn't change. So that will still operate as before. So hopefully, Dan, that answered your question. Hamilton asked the question, is the 66.6 discontinued? So the answer is not yet. It will be. You could still order it. But definitely a suggestion going forward is to start designing with the new inverter sizes, which really starts. You have a 40, you have an 80, a 100, and a 120. We do plan to, in the interim, there still could be, I don't know if BayWa has inventory of the current 66.6. We do plan to offer for a period of time, and there will be notifications sent out on this shortly, the 80K version of the 66.6. In other words, it'll be a 66.6 with 2 Synergy units and a Synergy manager, basically an 80K inverter depowered to 66.6 and relisted. So that will be offered for a period of time.
That's on the 480 side. On the 208 side, because I know we have a big 208 market there. You want to run through that, Ben?
Sure. Yeah, those are great points. So everything I just said about the 66.6 being eventually discontinued and replaced with the 80, it's exactly the same story with the 43.2 being replaced with the 50 kilowatt. So again, BayWa should have some inventory of 43.2s. If they don't, you could still order 43.2s, but it'll be in a new form factor with the Synergy units and the Synergy manager, basically a 50 kilowatt inverter derated to 43.2. And that end of life notification will be sent out shortly. So there will still be time. If you have project design with a 66.6 or a 43.2, you will still have time to order them before the size goes away.
And we do have inventory on those sizes, Ben.
Okay, perfect.
And just to clarify, so some, nobody panics, is that we're talking about the multi-unit inverters. Don't worry, your 30, 33.3, your 40, those are still there. Those are the single units. The same thing for the 14.4 and the 17.3, the 208 versions.
Thank you, Carolyn. So Gary asked a couple of questions here. Can you do a little more detail on the thermal sensors, how they work and where they are installed? So these are thermal sensors that are installed right at the connectors or the termination points on both the AC side and the DC side of the Synergy manager. And basically, we're just monitoring temperature, right? We're constantly monitoring temperature. I don't know what the set point is in terms of what constitutes a high temperature, but the inverter, like it's monitoring many different parameters during the operation of the inverter. That's something new that we added. So the thermal sensors themselves are quite small, and they're able to accurately monitor the temperature of the terminal blocks. And then again, as soon as it gets above a certain threshold, an alert will be sent, which will be seen on the monitoring portal. And it will say either AC or DC high temperature alert. And I don't know how they will categorize it. We have in our new alert mechanism on the monitoring portal, we have different severity levels of alerts. I'm not sure exactly how we categorize a high temperature on either AC or DC connection, but basically you will know an alert will be sent, and it does mean that somebody should go out there and check connections, make sure that they're properly torqued, properly seated, and if something needs to be fixed, and better to find out before it overheats than after. So hopefully that answered the question. And I guess, Matt, this is a question for you. So Gary also asked if there will be a link to this recording.
Yeah, absolutely. It will go out with the newsletter here shortly, and it's available from all the reps.
Great, great. So I didn't see any other questions that came up, and we still have 3 more minutes or 4 more minutes if anybody wants to ask any more questions. Okay.
There are a few more, Ben. You just got to scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, I see that now. Okay, so Hamilton also asked, Advantage needs to be of 100 kilowatt DC or AC? Good question. I forget. Carolyn, do you remember, is it DC or AC?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, the Advantage program, does it need to be above 100 kilowatt DC or AC?
Gosh, what a good question. Nobody's ever asked that.
Surprisingly.
We don't know.
Carolyn and I spend, the bulk of our time with large C&I accounts that are doing, megawatt or multi-megawatt. So Hamilton, good question. We'll find out and get the answer over to the BayWa team. And I see a question here from Corey. Whenever you have a bad optimer, don't roll a truck and replace it. And okay, so let me read the question. Advantage. I think I heard Ben say something to the effect of whenever you have a bad optimizer, don't roll a truck and replace it immediately. Instead, wait 6 months to replace it then. Can you please review how a company should best schedule O&M activities for sites enrolled in Advantage? So exactly that. Once every 6 months, you would roll the truck. If you have bad optimizers, that's when you would roll the truck to replace them. So if you have 1 or 2 or 3, roll them at each 6 months. So it's like a June and then a December. And there's no reason to roll it more frequently than that, because we will be calculating any lost production from those downed optimizers. Right, so that means twice a year. Now, if you happen to be out there for other work, because you're on site and you have bringing optimizers in the truck, then you could certainly replace it then. But as I said, we will pay for, with the Advantage projects enrolled in the Advantage program, we will pay for lost production based on, you tell us what the kilowatt hour rate is of the project and any other fit or other incentives that may be happening. You tell us that rate, we enter it into the system, and it is logged by the monitoring portal. And you will actually know when you look at the monitoring portal and you drill into the map view of the project, any optimizer that is now being calculated under the Advantage program will have a little A in the top right corner. So you'll know that that optimizer is down and Advantage is calculating the lost production. So hopefully that answers your question, Corey. Do the new inverters appear on the designer tool? Yes, they should. If they don't, then please let me know, but I'm understanding that they will, that they are. What's the highest elevation your products can be used at? That I'll need to check. I think we published that in our user manual. I can't recall the number off by heart, but we'll definitely check that. So I think that was the last question.
Yeah, that's great. We're coming to the end of time here, so really appreciate your time, Ben and Carolyn, helping educate us a little more on the product. Thank you to all the customers for attending as well. This was recorded, as we mentioned, so this will go out in the newsletter shortly for everyone. Just a reminder, all specs, warranty, installation docs are on our new web shop as well. So that's a great spot to go and check. And if you haven't signed up, please sign up for it. You can see inventory levels, pricing, all that sort of good stuff. We do have Canadian support here as well with SEDEC. So outside of the excellent BayWa reps, there's also SolarEdge boots on the ground here in Canada. We have plenty of stock of the product on all 4 warehouses across Canada. So once again, just thank you all for attending and hope you're all taking care out there. Have a good day.